and I know that you can barely imagine facing another full week of problem at work, with your children, or even worse, with your mother-in-law. But don't worry, we are here to entertain and to inform you, as every evening that God creates. And if you think that you won't manage facing this week, then just spend it by complaining on everything. You'll feel much better after that. At the summary of this edition, we will concentrate with a very important and politically noticeable issue: the alternative energies. Indeed, even if some Republicans in the middle of Texas claim that there ain't no problem with our consumption of energy, the latest climatic disasters that occurred in the United States didn't happen only in cinema. The problem of environment is a real one, perhaps the most important that we will have to face in the next decades. That is the reason why we will now concentrate with the alternative of shale gas. To discuss this topic, we have 4 interveners on our show tonight: Isaac Leining, Mehdi Ben Hassan, Christophe Ouvanet, and Ranjit Bundulu. Gentlemen, welcome on the Great Journal. Thank you very much for joining us. I am convinced that we will have a remarkable debate, since you are all concerned by the topic, but with different aspects. But first of all, what are we really talking about? What is the principle of hydraulic fracturing, which permits to exploit shale gas? I'm sure that all our viewers are confirmed scientists, but unfortunately, science wasn't my favorite subject at school. I apologize for that. So I might need some explanation about the scientific process. Dr. Isaac Leining, you are you have studied petroleum engineering, and you work now as a special advisor for one of the world's leading oil company, which is the Marathon Oil Corporation. Could you please explain us how it works?
Thank you. The main purpose of fracturing fluid are to extend fractures, add lubrication, change gel strength, and to carry propellant into the formation. There are 2 methods of transporting propellant in the fluid: high rate and high viscosity. The first causes small spread out microfractures. The second tends to cause large dominant fractures. Hydraulic fracturing is a process to stimulate a natural gas, oil, or geothermal energy well to maximize extraction. It is formed by pumping fracturing fluid into a welfare at the rate sufficient to increase pressure and the target depth to exceed that of the fracture gradient, the pressure gradient of the rock. The rock cracks, and the fracture fluid permits the rock extending the crack further and further, and so on. The fractures are localized as pressure drops off with the rate of frictional loss, which is relevant to the distance from the well. Typically, operators introduce a propellant into the injected fluid. Materials such as grains of sand, ceramic, or other particulates, thus preventing the fracture from closing when injections is stopped and pressure removed. A propellant is a material that will keep an induced hydraulic fracture open during or following a fracturing treatment, and can be a gel, foam, or slick water based. The most common chemical used for hydraulic fracturing in the USA in the last years was methanol, while some other most widely used chemicals were isopropyl alcohol, 2-butyl-hexaphenol, and ethylene glycol. Consideration of propellant strength and preventions of propellant failure becomes more important at greater depth, where pressure and stresses on fractures are higher. The propped fracture is permeable enough to allow the flow of gas, oil, salt water, and hydraulic fracturing fluids to the well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leining, for this very precise description of the process. I'm convinced that everyone here found it fascinating. Another important aspect surrounding shale gas is the right to exploit it. Mr. Ben Hassan, you are professor of mining law at the University of Harvard. Could you please explain us what are the different legislation surrounding shale gas?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. And I am here as an expert in mining law, and my role during this debate will be to remember our committed participants what the law says on the question of shale gas. An aspect of property law that is central to mining law is the question of who owns the mineral, such that they may legally extract it from the earth. This is often dependent on the type of mineral in question, the mining history of the jurisdiction, as well as the general background, legal tradition, and its treatment of property. Now I would like to compare the mining law in USA and in France regarding the question of raw materials. Whether in France or in USA, the owner of the ground is also the owner of the ground's basement. This rule is rigorously applied in the Anglo-Saxon countries. In the USA, all the natural resources of the basement belong to the ground's owner, without regard to depth. The gas or oil contained in the bedrock is a private property. The ground's owner has theoretically the right to permit a company to exploit these resources. And there is a direct contract between the owner and the firm. In theory, political authority does not intervene in this process. However, the state retains rights over phosphate, nitrate, potassium, salts, asphalt, coal, oil shale, and sulfur, and a right of appropriation, I'm not talking about ownership, by the state for oil and gas. Sand and gravel come under the Department of the Interior. In France, the owner needs an administrative authorization. It can be an exploration permit or an exploitation permit. Regarding the shale gas, it is totally forbidden to exploit it in France. In France, the state decides if someone can exploit the basement. The owner has no power to decide. The state represents the common welfare.
So if you want to exploit natural resources that are under your ground, it always requires the authorization of the states?
Well, as I said, it depends on whether you're in France or in USA. In France, it is totally forbidden to exploit shale gas since 2011. In USA, only the state has the right to exploit shale gas.
Thank you for this precision. Shale gas has become so important in the public debate, especially because it could be a new kind of profitable energy. According to some people, the benefits produced by hydraulic fracturing could be enormous. Christophe Unavé, you are representing one of the biggest oil and gas companies. To what extent could it be profitable?
So, I've been working for this company for 10 years now, and energy resources have no secrets for me anymore. This is why I can assure to everybody that shale gas represents the future of energy. There are two main reasons why the world's shale gas reserves are generating so much excitement. One is that shale gas offers an answer to a fast-growing global demand for energy. And the other is that it can help reducing energy dependence on today's oil-producing nations. First of all, population's growth and the vitality of emerging economics are driving the rise of energy demand in a global scale. The International Energy Agency is forecasting that demand will increase 40 to 50% by 2030. And by that time, natural gas is expected to account for about 25% of the global energy mix versus 21% in 2010. Conventional gas deposits located near consumption centers were the first to be tapped and now need to be replaced by either imports of conventional gas, produced fast from consumption center and transported by pipeline or tanker, or unconventional gas, such as shale gas. And shale gas offers a huge potential. It accounts for the majority of the gross recoverable unconventional gas, shale gas, tire gas, and coal bed methane, and estimated by the International Energy Agency at 380 trillion cubic meter, or 120 to 150 years of natural gas supply at the current rate of consumption.
Do you
And-
really consider that in this...
Excuse me, but where I'm come from, you have to wait until someone has finished to talk before intervening. Thank
Sorry
you.
for the interruption. Mr. Pouvanet, please continue.
Yes, thank you. So estimates of recoverable shale gas reserve in Europe range from 3 trillion to 12 trillion cubic meters. Because shale gas is found in many regions of the world, developing this resource should enable 1. Our country to become a gas exporter in the next 10 years. It will produce enough gas to meet domestic demand. 2. Fast-growing economies like China and India to acquire the energy resource needed to fuel their development. And 3. Europe to double its reserve life, allowing it to considerably reduce its import, which are constantly rising. And moreover, the advent of unconventional gas, shale gas, tire gas, and coal bed methane in the US market has increased the amount of natural gas available. This easing of supply has pushed down the gas price in the regions, benefiting consumer and industry alike.
So, if I understood you well, this would be a formidable energy reserve for the next centuries, but also an instrument of wealth worldwide.
Yes, indeed. Shale gas exploitation directly implies a great number of jobs creation, with direct as indirect employment related to this field. Ohio, for example, has currently a total of 38,000 jobs related to unconventional gas, and it is a number that is expected to increase.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pouvanet. Well, shale gas seems to be an interesting alternative to usual resources.
Mm-hmm.
But since it implies huge modification of the landscape, many organizations claim that this method represents an environmental disaster. Ranjit Bundulu, you are a member of Greenpeace, and it seems that you don't agree with Mr. Pouvanet on the opportunity of hydraulic fracturing. Can you please explain us why?
Of course I do, and indeed I do not agree with him. Listen, shale gas is a form of unconventional gas. Unconventional, referring to the techniques used to extract the energy sources and not the resources themselves. It is made up of heavily compacted mud and clay and is much less permeable than ordinary rock formations containing gas. To extract the gas that is trapped in shale, horizontal drilling techniques and hydraulic fracturations are required. Fracking involves high-risk activities that can have a devastating impact you cannot imagine on health, on the local environment, and has therefore already been banned by many regions and member states in the European Union. For a long time, natural gas has been touted as an efficient, abundant, and low-carbon energy resource. However, its production is different from shale gas, which requires an enormous amount of water and pumps at the same time tons of toxic chemicals into the planet Earth. The operation also involves leaks of methane, which has a heating effect 20 times greater than that of CO2. Across Europe, the industry is now presenting shale gas as a bridge fuel. But looking at the full impact of shale gas development, it clearly shows that this energy source cannot serve as a bridge to a low-carbon future. Shale gas is simply not the solution to the EU's energy, environment and climate challenges. It will only generate more problems in the long term and risks accelerating climate change in the coming decades. Do we really want to risk our health just to prolong unsustainable dependence on yet another even dirtier, finite fossil fuel? Together, let's ban fracking and shale gas before it's too late.
I'm quite amused as I hear these kind of remarks. Are we supposed to stop consuming energy? What do you propose, young man? Should we just banish electrical light and heating for our houses?
You know what, you're a funny guy. You don't understand the situation. Indeed, we have to leave today. How are we going to do when there won't be any source of energy on the earth? I'm sure that you know the film Mad Max, and I'm also sure that you don't want to see humanity, failing into barbarian slavery, because we would have run out of food. There are other possibilities for our children and for our future generations.
Yes, surely. No one doubts it. But since it is impossible to have a radical change of our consumption, some transition might be necessary. And what resource is then better than natural gas for that? Isn't it the cleanest burning fossil fuel? Dr. Leiden, I'm sure that you will agree with me on this point, won't you?
Yes, firstly, we should
That
consider
is just not possible. Am I absolutely flabbergasted by what I just heard? A clean fossil fuel? The cleanest? How is it possible that hydrocarbons are clean? Come on, please, am I the only one who is dreaming? What about the water pollution on the surface? And the water pollution on the ground as well? I'm sure that anyone here would not appreciate to drink water with toxic chemicals within it. Shale gas implies problems with the air as well. Or do you consider it as normal to have huge methane quantities released in the atmosphere? The landscape now, how will we attract tourists? If all our natural sites have been destroyed because of hydraulic fracturing, the problem of noise...
Mr.
is
Bundulu,
also...
please, calm down and listen to Mr. Provali's proposition. I'm sure that you two can agree on some kind of compromise.
What? What compromise? What explanation? I cannot listen to someone who only listens to his own money.
Excuse me, young man, but you
Don't
are very...
call me young man.
Certainly, Mr. Bundulu. But I think that we are on the false debate. So, yes, indeed, it is to propose to me to increase wealth and benefits. But why should be it reprehensible if everybody enjoys these? The purpose of ecological policy is to find alternative sources of energy. Well, we could invest in these by using shale gas. As I said, it would be a transition. If we reduce consumer cost of natural gas and electricity, this will stimulate economic growth and increase federal, state, and local tax revenue. It is much easier to develop sustainable energy if we have the possibility to pay for it. Even a secondary school student understands that.
Please, I think the professor would like to explain.
It's funny how you only see the glass half full. You're talking about money, about wealth, about welfare. How much exactly is the hydraulic fracturing costing? And did you consider the collateral damages due to the extraction? I'm sure that you considered in your brilliant mind that costs would be huge. Fracturing increases the risk of earthquake, and that kind of natural disaster is usually quite expensive.
Yes, the young man is right. Yeah. Fracturing implies matrix damage, adverse formation, fluid interaction, and altered fracture geometry, thereby decreasing...
Well, Professor, thank you for your intervention. But I think we could need your help if you need to calculate the weight of a hill, maybe. But now...
Please, Mr. Punavi, I'm sure Professor Ben Hassan would like to explain us how the rights resolves those disputes. Mr. Ben Hassan, please.
Yes, thank you for finally giving me a moment to speak. I must admit that I am astonished by what I heard, and from both sides. Gentlemen, I think that I repeated many times that only public actors have the capacity to carry out the exploitation. So they won't behave as entrepreneurs whose main purpose is to make benefits. But since, you know, that they are public actors, they lead public policies, so they have some sense of public interest. Don't you think, Mr. Bundulu? Right now, shale gas isn't this public danger that you want to describe to us. The search of alternative energy is a real challenge for mankind, and it is only by being responsible and conscious that we may find a global solution. It is clear that traditional resources won't last forever, but we won't heat all our houses with shale gas either. For these kind of issues that regards all countries, developed as well as developing ones, we can't afford to consider little personal strikes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ben Hassan. I am glad that we invited a professor to bring some reason on this TV show. So it is with this nice conclusion that we end our show tonight, and obviously we won't manage to make those two ones agree. Dear viewers, don't worry. Tomorrow you will still go to work with your car by using oil, and you will still heat your house with gas. But if you find an alternative, well then just try to patent it and to sell it for a very expensive price. Thank you very much for watching. Back to studios!